Watch this.
A pandemic and politics have certainly not helped improve on our past problems of appealing to doctors here in Idaho. We're getting another perspective from the Gem State's largest health system. It's been a long ride for the leader of the Boise Bicycle Project, but after 16 years, Jimmy Hallyburton has reached the end of his road, a journey that wasn't always like coasting downhill. We're putting on a platinum party this summer to celebrate KTVB's 70th anniversary, but we aren't the only ones showing our age, so today we're celebrating a couple of them. So let's be clear about this. Idaho has never really been fully staffed when it comes to healthcare providers. According to a Kaiser Family Health Foundation study from 2019, the Gem State was already dead last in the country when it came to the number of doctors per people in the state. 1.7 physicians per 1,000 people, nearly half the national average of 3.1. Well, that was worse than the year before when, according to the Association of American Medical Colleges, Idaho had 1.9 doctors per 1,000 people. So we were already on the downward slide when the COVID pandemic hit Idaho in the March of 2020, and our hospitals began to fill up with patients suffering the effects of a deadly respiratory virus. Nurses and doctors were forced into an overwhelming string of overtime shifts. We were in crisis standards of care for months. Remember that? A year and a half after it began.
I don't know where the end is. Will Do This Code Blue have to console a family member, because their loved one died from COVID, and then turn around and see that there's a big music festival, downtown, that people are going to large gatherings and not wearing their masks. And
plus, doctors had to deal with a public who didn't really believe COVID was real, some of them telling them that to their faces, loudly and aggressively. All of that led to a lot of burnout and abandonment of their careers, exacerbating the physician shortfall. Governor Brad Little signed the coronavirus emergency declaration on March 13th, 11 days before he signed something else which would greatly impact the number of doctors working in Idaho. On March 24th, 2020, Governor Little signed Senate Bill 1385 into law. That would be Idaho's abortion ban, the trigger law, which would make it a felony to perform an abortion or even try to. A conviction would put the medical professional, in prison for a minimum of 2 years and suspending their license. The trigger would be when Roe v. Wade would be overturned, which the U.S. Supreme Court did 2 years later with the Dobbs decision. Idaho's near-total abortion ban would go into effect at the end of August last year, leaving many of Idaho's OBGYNs and maternal fetal medicine doctors in the crosshairs and confused about what constitutes saving the life of the mother, one of the 3 exceptions to the law. Then came the 6-week ban, then the law which would allow family members to sue medical providers who perform an abortion for $20,000. Then this past legislative session, the law which would criminalize anyone who drives a minor to get an abortion in another state without their parents' permission. All of this adding another layer to Idaho's label of extreme caption contest, something a couple of lawmakers learned last week on a trip back to D.C.
It dawned on us that we actually in Idaho are the worst in the worst of the states across the country as far as limitations and just really restrictive laws. We have total abortion bans where some other folks have at least up to 12 weeks.
We're seeing a loss of healthcare access that really eclipses even the reddest of other states. So we have an extreme emergency in Idaho that exceeds anywhere in the nation. We've already lost 45% of our fetal maternal medicine specialists.
The first noticeable and newsworthy impact came from up north this past March when Bonner General, that is, announced it would stop delivering babies or offering other obstetrical care for several reasons. Loss of pediatrician coverage, a decrease in how many babies they deliver, but also because of Idaho's legal and political climate. Quote, highly respected, talented physicians are leaving. Recruiting replacements will be difficult. In addition, the Idaho legislature continues to introduce and pass bills that criminalize physicians for medical care nationally recognized as standard of care. Did we mention the anti-transgender law, which wouldn't allow doctors to prescribe puberty blockers or hormone therapy to transgender teenagers? So Idaho's shortage of doctors, already dead last, is getting worse, apparently. Last month, we spoke with St. Alphonsus about this, who told us they are losing 2/3 of their maternal fetal medicine physicians because of Idaho's political climate. Today, we're hearing from St. Luke's. who can concur. There's no doubting Idaho's dearth of doctors.
Burnout's real. We absolutely are seeing that. We have a high number of physicians and other providers who are saying, hey, I've had enough. I'm looking at retirement. I'm looking at that next phase of my life. That's definitely happening.
The workload isn't the only thing overwhelming right now.
So yes.
Dr. Frank Johnson, St. Luke's chief medical officer for Boise, Elmore, and McCall, says that Idaho politics are also something to deal with.
Yeah, I'd say it's real. We have lost doctors because of the abortion laws, total abortion ban law. Really, it comes down to that criminalization of the physician-patient relationship. Doctors, my colleagues, myself, are ethically committed to serve that patient in front of us, have shared decision-making, and have a discussion of risks, benefits, limitations. That's what we do, and that's what our expectation is. When there are laws that criminalize that conversation, potentially criminalize that conversation, that creates a lot of fear and anxiety for docs, appropriately so. And the ability to feel supported in that relationship, yeah, it's been eroded by that. So especially when it comes to OB docs or maternal fetal medicine docs, that's where the biggest impact on that law is, and we've definitely seen doctors leaving because of that law.
How would you quantify that?
Yeah, the numbers that we have look like across the state we've lost about 40% of maternal fetal medicine doctors here at St. Luke's. It's a small number of maternal fetal medicine docs. We've had 6, we're down to 4. So we're working, that's a third obviously. It gets really hard then because those remaining docs have an increased burden. Their call responsibility goes up, their clinical responsibility goes up, and their burnout goes up, and their desire to leave goes up. So it becomes this cycle that's really tough to turn around when we start losing those docs.
Because some of those smaller hospitals out in Emmett or up in Bonner County, where they say, look, we can't do labor and delivery anymore, it seems it would put the burden on systems like St. Luke's.
Well, it does. You know, we're here to support those smaller hospitals, the critical access hospitals, and provide services when they can't. That's our commitment to our state and our community and our region. So it does. It creates an increased burden on an already shrinking pool of docs to provide that care. It gets tough.
What's more difficult right now, recruitment or retainment?
You know, it's a mixed bag. I would say that today, I believe that we have seen the biggest immediate short-term impact of physicians leaving because of the laws that are in place now. I believe. I don't know that for sure. What we're facing now, probably a bigger impact, is that recruitment piece. When this starts happening and physicians are feeling like the laws in the state of Idaho put an undue burden and a risk on their profession and on their practice and on their ethical responsibility, they tend to shy away. They're not eager to come here when there's plenty of other options around the country that they can partake in. When we talk to recruits, they ask about support for the independence of physicians and the physician-patient relationship. They ask for the impact of that criminalization of physician practice and what that might mean for them. And yeah, they've got those questions. It is a concern. So it makes it difficult to recruit across the board.
Dr. Johnson tells me that to address the need of maternal fetal medicine physicians, that St. Luke's brings in what are essentially traveling doctors. They can fill the need short term, but they aren't really a long-term solution, as many of those doctors, they like to move around the country, and St. Luke's isn't able to convince them just to stay here permanently. And Brian, it's an interesting conversation I had with Dr. Johnson. This isn't political, it's reality. My conversation I had with him, I said, look, you know, when you talk about the politics of these conversations, how do you balance that? He said the laws are what they are. You know, at this point,
we're not taking a side.
We're not taking a side, but they're saying the laws are what they are, and this is what we're hearing from doctors that are leaving and doctors we're trying to attract. And it's not just OBGYNs or maternal fetal medicine there. When you have these doctors that are questioning Idaho and they're questioning, how safe is it to practice there, or what is it going to be like practicing in Idaho? Sometimes it's easier just to skip over the state and say, well, I'll just go to Washington or Oregon or Colorado or something else in the region, because Dr. Johnson told me he's had conversations where he has folks that say, I don't want to deal with that. I don't want to deal with the political pressures of it. I'll just move on somewhere else.
We talked about this last month. There was that poll given out to 117 physicians, and 75 of them said they were considering leaving directly because of restrictive abortion laws. 73 of the 75 who said they were thinking about leaving, 73 of them, 97% said it's because of the restrictive abortion laws here in Idaho.
And that's just the reality of what it is.
Yeah.
You know, we know that the Idaho medical groups, that they try to talk with lawmakers about clarifying the laws, but I mean, the reality is this is the situation that doctors feel when they come to Idaho.
And it's not also because of their practice, but because they're trying to raise families here too, and they don't want to necessarily raise them in that environment. All right, thank you very much, Joe. The founder of Boise Staples reaching the end of one long ride. Boise Bicycle Project founder and executive director Jimmy Hallyburton is calling it a career. He announced that from the Boise Bicycle Project this morning, though his last day won't be until September, so there's still a few months to go. Jimmy founded the nonprofit 16 years ago with a mission to make Boise the bicycle capital of America. He's tried doing that by spearheading the fight against goat heads and providing people with access to bikes regardless of income. He does add, though, it's time for a new chapter. BBP has grown into more than he ever imagined, and he says it will continue to do important work well after he says goodbye. Here's Andrew Bartline.
Wow. A bicycle is made of a lot of parts, all coming together, equating to a complete sum.
The whole is greater than the sum of its parts, that's for sure.
The Boise Bicycle Project's known that to be true. Now, for 16 years, finally anticipating a position change in the peloton by losing an integral part.
Yeah, pretty soon.
Founder Jimmy Hallie Burton is stepping off the pedals.
After 16 years of the Boise Bicycle Project, I'm planning on retiring at the end of September.
He declared the war on goat heads. He answered thousands of holiday wish lists, all part of the chain to reach the final goal.
We had a vision of transforming Boise into the bicycle capital of America. Again, a place where everyone had a bike, the ability to get it fixed up, and amazing places to ride in every single neighborhood.
You probably thought about this a while, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I've been thinking about what my transition and succession plan at BBP is going to be for years and years and years. I started this place when I was 25 years old. There's nothing that I love more than BBP and the people that are involved with it, and so I wanted to make sure that whenever I did leave, that I left it in a really, really good spot.
Because the part about how it started goes back to his days fighting wildfires.
Yeah, Brian Anderson and I, he's the other co-founder. We were both firefighters. We worked on the Idaho City Hot Shots, and I remember the day that we came up with the idea for BBP. It was on the Castle Rock fire up in Sun Valley. It had been 2 weeks of intense firefighting. It finally slowed down, and we started talking about our backgrounds.
They shared a childhood love for bicycles. They had the skill set to repair them.
There was a large amount of our community who couldn't afford a bike or couldn't afford to get their bicycle fixed up and saw this gap in the community.
Jimmy had all the parts.
When you don't like the way that things are, the way around you, you can complain about them. You cannot do anything about it and just put up with it, or you can figure out how can I personally do something about this. For me, it was building a bike, giving it away to a kid.
Part after part, bike after bike, year after year. But it's more than that.
It is more than a bike. As much as we love bicycles, what we really love is what a bicycle can connect people to.
Which tends to be a connection with each other.
I kind of joke around sometimes that I'm the biggest beneficiary of BBP because I've gotten to interact with thousands and thousands of people over all these years that have taught me new things or inspired me by the work that they've done.
And these people, they make up the Bicycle Project. They're the ones making the mission possible.
That's how you actually make positive change happen.
That's how Jimmy built BBP, where he himself is just a single part of a greater whole.
We've seen that happen at BBP by getting people involved, leveraging their strengths, and letting them be part of something that's bigger than themselves. And I think that's what BBP is.
Hallyburton's official last day is September 29th. They will start to look for a new executive director here shortly. Hallie Burton says he has prepared a long time for this and has a strong transition plan in place to phase into the next chapter. And he says, Brian, he's now excited to volunteer at these events with the Bicycle Project and be the one that's maybe taking orders from the people he originally hired and serve the community in a little bit of a different way and still be involved, but not be on the board or not be employed or anything like that. He's more interested in a volunteer role now.
Yeah, thousands of people he's met, but the thousands and thousands of bikes that they've given away and given that freedom to kids.
And I know you've done a lot of stories on that too.
It's an amazing project, and yeah, hopefully they'll find somebody soon to keep it going, and you know it will, because there's a lot of people involved with it now that would love to just keep it going.
They have months for the search.
All right, thanks, Andrew.
All right, one of our big weather headlines this week is that we get to flip the calendar from spring to summer, kick off a whole new season tomorrow. That happens at about 8:58 in the morning with that summer solstice. And temperature-wise, it is going to be a cooler than average start to the new season, albeit warmer than we've been in days past. So far today, Boise's only reached 63 degrees. That is the high temperature thus far on our Tuesday, a good 20 degrees below where we typically are as we get ready ready to head into the summer season. So as far as current temperatures go across the region, we're back down to 61 in Boise, 51 in McCall, a much warmer day in McCall. They only hit about 43 yesterday in McCall. For all of you up in Long Valley, it was chilly. 54 in Sun Valley right now, 47 in Stanley. You can see some storm clouds gathering in many of those sky cams. And yes, we are seeing some active weather rolling in from south to north, some scattered showers for the Sun Valley area, Magic Valley, and a thunderstorm rolling through northern Owyhee County, reaching for portions of Canyon and Ada counties. This active weather will lift off to the northeast tonight, and as it does, it will allow cold temperatures again tomorrow morning, but slightly warmer conditions for tomorrow afternoon. So we'll tack on maybe 5 to 8 degrees of warmth for our first day of summer tomorrow, but lots of sunshine and light wind. So I do think it'll be pretty pleasant for our first day of the new season. We continue to warm from there. Slight chance of showers and storms pops back into the picture on Friday, but generally speaking, nice and warm for the next several days. In fact, by Sunday and Monday, back up near 90 degrees with plenty of sunshine in Boise.
All right, some of you have heard this before. KTVB is celebrating its 70th anniversary this year. But, you know, we're not the only ones. Places like the Parma Motor View, events like the National Old Time Fiddlers Contest and Festival, also known as the Weezer Fiddle Fest, they're both putting on a platinum party this year. You know what else has been around that long? 2 of Boise's public pools, 2 of them. Joe Paris tells us how the Lowell and South pools opened in 1953 to help meet a growing population.
Summertime in the city of trees, or more appropriately, the desert. It can get pretty hot.
To really start our summer in the city of Boise, it's really opening the municipal pools.
Prior to 1953, the city of Boise had just one pool for its approximately 35,000 residents. It opened in 1892, but it gradually became too small to serve the growing city. It was also too far for some, as the city continued to expand west. They saw this before it became a problem. For 20 years, citizens and civic organizations campaigned for a city-owned and operated public swimming pool.
There was a push by the administration at the time to pass a bond in the city to be able to update the natatorium and then build 2 new pools.
In 1952, it was put on the ballot. Should the city of Boise spend $200,000 to modernize the natatorium and build 2 new public swimming pools? The voters said yes.
The bond passed. The funding was put in place, and so that's how South and Lowell really became. They're called South Pool and Lowell Pool, but the actual architecture itself really is just to identify this is a municipal pool, which was really a big catchphrase back in the 50s and 60s for public pools. They were always referred to as municipal pools.
Their names come from the schools nearby, South Middle School and Lowell Elementary School. Construction began almost immediately. The city of Boise selected a pool engineer by the name of Wesley Bintz.
And he had a unique design of an above-ground pool that were fairly popular at the time.
They were believed to have a smaller footprint than traditional pools.
Similar to architecture today, if you build a 2-story building, you need less land mass to go up as opposed to go out. And so the concept was very similar in the 50s and 60s when it came to pool design. You didn't need as large a footprint to do an above ground versus an in-ground.
The facilities were also unique. Bathrooms and locker rooms and the check-in desk were located beneath the pool deck. Boise company, Jordan & Sons, was hired to construct them. The pools have identical entrances and feature Art Modern design elements.
It's just the actual outside Art Deco piece to this where it says municipal pool. It's very unique. We've seen that same kind of design has been used in other bins designs across the country.
Lowell Pool opened on June 20th, 1953. According to the city of Boise, it reached capacity that first afternoon. The Idaho Statesman reported at the time that more than 1,200 people attended the official dedication of the pool 2 days later. It was so popular that throughout the summer, the city had to put a shift system in to make sure that everyone was able to get in. South Pool opened 10 days later on June 30th. Today, both pools are closed. They closed in 2020 because of the pandemic. And despite calls from the community to reopen them, the pools have remained closed for a number of reasons, including what the city says are deficiencies and safety issues.
There's a number of people that have a real desire to preserve the historic nature of the pools. They grew up swimming here, their children did, their grandchildren did, and so there's really a unique perspective that a number of our users have.
Okay, so last spring, Boise Parks and Rec did a community outreach about the pools. They say the results of that show most people do want to keep the pools as they are. But in order to do that, they need to be brought up to code and correct the several ADA issues, which would cost about $2.4 million per pool. A number likely higher, though, as that estimation was made back in 2021. Boise Mayor Lauren McLean and City Council, well, they have not made a decision yet. Boise Parks and Rec says right now the funding just isn't in the budget to make those repairs, but once it is, that's when they can make a decision whether or not they will pay to upgrade those pools. Let's get right to your comments. Bill J. sent this in. I think your story on the shortage of medical professional lost its way. You chose to focus on problems associated with Idaho's abortion and gender identity laws. Those laws need reasonable changes, but physician burnout has many other factors needing remedies. We talked about how we already started out short-staffed, and of course you add the COVID pandemic on top of that. Overwhelming overtime is a thing and a significant contribution to burnout. Idaho's legislature is turning Idaho into a third world country. The proof is in the number of professionals leaving the state, not just medical either, Larry, as you pointed out. BPP is one of the best. I got in a little trouble years ago and I did my community service there. Awesome way to do something I love to help repay my debt to society. See you tomorrow.